After months of speculation, former Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown announced his plan to try again for the U.S. Senate, a comeback campaign that is already shifting the odds in the high-stakes race. Welcome to Sunday Briefing. I'm Colleen Marshall. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report rated Ohio's Senate race as likely Republican until Brown tossed his hat into the ring, and now it is rated as leans Republican. We've got some new poll numbers for you a little later. But this contest expected to be a contentious, expensive fight for the seat that could help decide the balance of power in the United States Senate. Brown will go up against Republican Senator John Husted, who was appointed by Governor DeWine to fill the seat vacated by J.D. Vance when he became vice president. Brown told me this week he is determined to go back to Capitol Hill to be a voice for working class Ohioans.
I didn't really ever expect to run for office again as this year wore on. This rig system got worse. 490,000 Ohioans will lose insurance, health insurance, a huge tax cut driving a $3 trillion hole in the federal budget. And prices kept going up. Life's been hard. I mean, we go to grocery stores, we go to the drugstore, we're walking down the street, we hear from people that say things are getting worse. So Connie and I, because we didn't think that we hadn't thought of running for it, we do it again.
Brown and his Pulitzer Prize-winning wife Connie Schultz are set to do in 2026 what they did in 2024, go around the state talking to voters about what will again be the centerpiece of Brown's Senate campaign, the dignity of work.
What I found is I've been able to get things done when the Republicans are in the majority or when the Democrats are in the majority. I've been able to get things done with Trump as president, with Bush as president, with Obama or Biden as president. So the decision is based on that Ohio, there's no voice for workers in the U.S. Senate for Ohio workers. And I want to be that voice again and get things done on behalf of whether it's a pension, whether it's Social Security, whether it's middle-class kids, whether it's putting a lid on drug prices. I want to go back and do that again.
With Donald Trump at the top of the ticket in MAGA-heavy Ohio, Brown's worker-centric political vision was not enough to push him past Bernie Moreno last year. He fell short by more than 3 points, but Brown still outperformed Kamala Harris in Ohio by more than 8 points, and he is widely regarded as the strongest Democrat in the state. It's the reason high-profile labor leaders were hoping he would run for governor. Are they angry at you at this point? They've always been your supporters. What is your relationship going to be like with labor leaders going forward?
Well, I kicked off my campaign Monday morning at 7 a.m. online. My first Zoom was with about 40 union activists, labor leaders in Ohio and nationally. They will say when you interview them, even those who might have wanted me to run for governor, they will say that I'm perhaps the strongest voice in Washington for workers. So they will be behind me overwhelmingly. I'll continue that support.
And Brown has strong support from Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who needs to flip 4 seats if Democrats are to retake control of the U.S. Senate. Schumer apparently views Republican John Husted as vulnerable.
No surprise with John Husted, his time in Columbus, as legislator, speaker, secretary of state, lieutenant governor has always been to advocate for wealthy people and big corporations. That's what his career's been. As he was appointed by Governor DeWine, his career is the same thing. He's now in Washington helping. He votes for a tax cut for billionaires and runs the deficit up $3 trillion. He votes to cut 490,000 people off of health insurance and close rural hospitals.
But Brown carries the baggage of the Biden administration, viewed as weak on borders and not honest about the former president's mental decline. Let's talk about what we're going to be hearing from the other side in this campaign. We've already heard it from John Husted. The first thing he said was, well, he's been a politician for 50 years. He's 72 years old. Why would he get back into the race? They're going to be going after you for being a career politician in his 70s. What's your response to that?
Well, John Husted has been a career politician also, but forget that. What have you done in your life? I have fought for workers no matter what job I held in elective office, as a congressman, as a senator. I've been one of the strongest voice for workers in the whole government. John Husted has been a strong voice for utility companies, and you've already seen electric prices go up, electricity prices. He's been a strong voice for Wall Street. He's been a strong voice for the drug companies. So make the choice. Do you want, your politics isn't really left or right, it's whose side are you on? Do you want somebody who's been on the side of workers and the middle class and keeping prices down? Or do you want somebody who's been on the side of Wall Street and higher utility bills and higher drug prices? And that is a very easy case to make and a very easy case to understand that I'll be there advocating for workers.
Brown admits it's been tough to be on the sidelines as the red carpet was rolled out for Vladimir Putin.
He could have been arrested because he's been declared a war criminal. He can't go to many other democratic countries without being arrested. So we're on the wrong side here.
And as Congress passed the big, beautiful bill.
What's bothered me that the system's rigged and has been, and I've always fought that. It bothers me more when I go to a grocery store or walk down the street and I hear people say their lives are getting worse because of that bill and because there's been no real focus in keeping prices down. In people, they see corporate America make more and more money.
Before I let you go, what will be job one for you if you were reelected, and what's job one in this campaign?
Job one is always for me, listen to workers. Put workers at the table in these decisions. Listen to workers.
Now, we have invited Senator John Husted to also sit down with us and talk about this important Senate campaign, and we hope to have him on a future edition of Sunday Briefing. But next, another hat tossed into the ring this week. Former Ohio House Minority Leader Allison Russo talks about her political future. State Representative and former House Minority Leader Allison Russo this week announced she will run in 2026 to be Ohio's next Secretary of State. Fellow Democrat Brian Hambly, a Cincinnati area oncologist, announced he would run in that race back in January. And Republican Robert Sprague, the current Ohio Treasurer, is also running for Secretary of State. Russo tells me she wants to restore faith in the election system.
Some of that skepticism has been well earned. I mean, we certainly here in the state of Ohio have seen an attack on people's right to vote, an attack on the transparency of what is appearing before them in the ballot box, manipulation of ballot language to fit a specific outcome.
Russo says for 8 years there's been a relentless assault on the integrity of elections in Ohio and across the country. Just days ago, President Trump vowed again to get rid of mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots.
The intent is to discourage voting and to keep people from having full access to the ballot. I firmly believe that voting is a right, it's not a privilege, and that we need to do all that we can to ensure that people who are eligible to vote have full access to the ballot, can make their voice heard.
Russo says she also believes voters are marginalized by gerrymandering and wants politicians out of the process. She favors citizen commissions drawing political maps.
There are many voters in many parts of the state that feel like their vote doesn't matter because the outcome is already predetermined. And a lot of that is because of how these maps are drawn.
But Democrat struggles go far beyond questionable maps. Republicans control nearly every statewide office and are generally better funded.
I've never shied away from hard work, and I've never shied away from a hard challenge. And, I'm committed to this because I think it is this important. We have got to restore power back to where it belongs, and that is with the people. And I think the Secretary of State has a huge role to play in that.
This will be Allison Russo's first statewide campaign, but as the former minority leader, she says she has campaigned for candidates in nearly all 88 Ohio counties. Now she'll travel the state with a message of her own.
Number one, I'm pro-voter, and number two, I want to take the partisanship out of the Secretary of State's office. Voters want to trust that their vote matters and that their voice matters. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the last 8 years, even more, is that that this office has not inspired that, and it can be done better. And I'm committed to making that better.
The midterm election is 15 months away, but the Republican ticket is firmly set. And according to our new poll with Emerson College, the GOP is in a strong position. We polled 800 Ohio voters, and if the election were held today in the race for governor, Republican Vivek Ramaswamy would beat Democrat Amy Acton by 10 points. Former Democrat Congressman Tim Ryan is said to be considering a run for governor. He would also lose in a hypothetical matchup with Ramaswamy. In the U.S. Senate race, if held today, Jon Husted would come out on top, about 6 points ahead of the newly announced candidate Sherrod Brown. And as for what's on the minds of Ohio voters, by far the number one concern is the economy. Threats to democracy far back in the number 2 spot, with housing affordability, health care, and education rounding out the top 5. When we come back, our expert strategists dig into those poll results and whether or not Governor DeWine was right to deploy Ohio National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. Welcome back, everyone. We have 2 strategists with us this week to talk about the news of the week. Democrat David Pepper, a strategist from the Cincinnati area, and Mike Gonadakis from here in Central Ohio, a Republican, also the head of Ohio Right to Life. This week we saw what no one was really surprised about, but we now know that Sherrod Brown wants to run for the Senate again. He wants to take on Jon Husted. I'll ask you first, David.
Yeah.
Is this a good move for your party?
I think it is. You know, if you look last year, in a year that Kamala Harris lost by 11, Sherrod overperformed by about 7, I think between 7 and 8. If you have a year next year that doesn't have the Trump on the ballot and has some more wind at the Democrats' back, that 7 or 8 point overperformance in the past at least has spelled victory for Sherrod Brown. And I think Jon Husted, not only has he gone along with everything Trump wanted, from Medicaid cuts to food stamps to the crazy high costs due to tariff chaos, he also has a pretty tough record to defend in Ohio. You know, the ECOT scandal, First Energy. So I think that Husted has a lot of things that Sherrod will be able to talk about that he couldn't talk about against someone like Bernie Moreno, who had never been in office before.
Yeah, because now we know Husted does have a record, and his record will be on the ballot in the same way, though, that Sherrod Brown's record will be on the ballot.
Sure, and John's record's undefeated. He's never lost an election in the state of Ohio, and just 4 years ago, the DeWine-Husted ticket won by 25 points, Colleen, over Nan Whaley, the Democrat nominee. But at the end of the day, you know, the Democrat Party in Ohio continues to recycle same persons over. It was Lee Fisher forever, then it was Ted Strickland, then it was Richard Cordray. Now we're back to Sherrod Brown, who's turned 73 this year. He's been a politician for almost 50 years. He has to go out and now defend his record as being in the majority with Joe Biden on the ballot and our president of the United States. Look, Trump won, as David said, by 11 points less than 2 years ago because Ohioans rejected Joe Biden. Now they're gonna tie Biden to Brown's record and say, why didn't you close the borders? Why did you vote for men and women's sports? All that is coming back, and he has to answer that, he being Sherrod Brown.
You know, he does have a lifelong record as being a lifelong politician, but so does Jon Husted.
Yep.
They have very similar records. Both of them served as Secretary of State. Both of them have been on the ballot over and over and over again. But they're trying to reintroduce each other to voters, aren't they? He has a point. They're going to have to go after each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, but Sherrod Brown is a known quantity. He said the same thing, always for fighting for workers, dealing with other big issues. And I think next year, now again, a lot of it depends on the broader context, but at this election next year is a referendum on high costs, a slowing economy, the chaos that we're seeing from Trump, cuts to Medicaid, maybe been the most toxic issue in the entire election, cuts to food stamps and other things. That's the record Jon Husted will have to defend, and Sherrod is on the right side with the voters of all those issues. So if it's a referendum about the last couple of years, I think Sherrod Brown's long record of fighting on the right side of those issues will really stand up well against Jon Husted, whose record right now every week is becoming more toxic.
Yeah, I want to ask you quickly about the polling numbers, though, that we had just a few minutes ago, showing that already Husted has a 6-point lead over Sherrod Brown. and showing that no one knows who Amy Acton is, 50% of the people.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by some of those poll results?
I'm not surprised. I think David and I talked beforehand, and I think we both said, yeah, in a snapshot in time, that that's probably where we are as Ohio. John up 6 points. But I think a really concerning point for Sherrod Brown has to be in that poll you just mentioned. Sherrod Brown is only winning the women vote by 3%, according to the poll that we saw here. 3%. That's not going to get him across the finish line. John is doing well with women. He's doing very well with men. He's winning by 40% right now, and he's got that Trump coalition. Look, Ohioans are gravitating to leadership like John Husted. Sherrod Brown continues to use the same talking point, dignity of work, dignity of work, and the unions just came out in Northwest Ohio and endorsed John Husted. So he's going to have to come up with something else if he wants to be successful.
Quickly, your reaction to the poll.
Yeah, I mean, Sherrod Brown's fight for workers, again, he overperformed by 7 points last time. So I don't want to dismiss your poll, but if next year Donald Trump's approval rating is +7 or 8, which is what this poll is, and yeah, it's going to be a good Republican year. And I think that sample drives a lot of what we're seeing. If Donald Trump, as I've seen in other polls, is underwater or at 0, then that 6-point deficit to Houston is all of a sudden 0 or +1. So yes, if Donald Trump by next year and all the Medicaid cuts and all the other stuff, if all that's happening and he's at +8, then yeah, that'll determine outcomes here. I don't think that's going to be where we are, and I actually don't think that's where we are right now.
All right.
You put Trump at a point where he's breaking even or below, and I think both these races, Senate and governor, are razor thin and anyone's to grab.
All right, we've got to go to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about something else going on this week. Ohio troops in Washington, D.C. Stay with us. Governor DeWine this week decided to send Ohio National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. to help with that crime prevention effort. Did he overstep?
No, thank you, Governor DeWine, for doing that on behalf of not just the men and women that live in D.C., but for law and order across the country. Look, Colleen, the D.C. media just reported the first time since they ever started reporting there was no murders for 7 days in D.C. Crime is down, carjackings down, rapes, robberies are all down since President Trump took over and brought law and order. Now African-American children can walk safely to school. African-American families that live in D.C., which is predominantly African-American, can now walk the streets without fear of being killed, robbed, or mugged. And President Trump is doing that for them, and Governor DeWine, you did an amazing job by standing up and helping out.
But do we want our nation's capital to have armed men with rifles on every corner?
Sadly, yes, we have to. I'm sorry, David.
No, that's okay. I don't agree. I think that one of the red flags when you're moving towards an authoritarian government is when you basically have troops doing basic policing in cities, and that's what we have there. I think it's more of what the optics that Trump likes, but already we're seeing that these National Guard folks who are just doing what they're being asked to do by governors and others, they're being sent not even to the high crime areas. A lot of it is sort of more just high visibility tourism spots. Like the whole thing, I think, is a sad show. And I think if a governor is essentially commander in chief of that National Guard in their state. And there was a Republican governor in Vermont who said, no, we don't want to do this. This is not mission critical for our National Guard. We don't want to do it there, and we certainly don't want to be starting to do it in cities, in places like Ohio. If we want to improve safety in Ohio, for example, they have been defunding local government here for 12, 13, 14 years. So we have fewer police officers, fewer sheriff's deputies. If we want to keep things safe, support local policing, bring other resources to bear. By the way, Mike DeWine's done that somewhat recently, but they've been cutting, lowering the overall staffing of police departments, and now they're saying we'll bring in the National Guard to make up the difference. So I think there's solutions here. National Guard isn't the solution.
But it's Democrat city councils that are defunding the police departments.
No.
The city of Columbus defunded police.
Do you know what happens here? We run out of time. And we've done that for this week anyway. These arguments will be continuing, and we hope you will continue to join us on Sunday Briefing. We'll see you next week.